Sermon of the Week, Myrtle, based on the book of Esther. "Mom, he pinched me," Myrt said, almost in a scream. "Honey, I can't watch you two all the time. Please, please try to get along," her mother said from the kitchen. "Ouch," Myrt said as her little brother pinched her again on her now sore rear end. She swung out with her open hand, trying to slap him across the back, but missed. "Mom," she screamed again. Her mother finally poked her head through the kitchen door and pointed. "You both are on time out. You over there and you over there." The two took chairs on opposite sides of the room. Her brother, Louis, was smiling, but tears began to roll down her face. Her stepmother stared at first her, then at her, then her stepbrother. Then she shook her head and returned to the kitchen, where she was cooking a lamb stew for supper. "I wish I were dead," Myrt whispered to herself. "I wish I was dead just like my mother. Death has to be better than this. I hate my brother. I hate all men. I keep getting B's in school. Why can't I have a nice boyfriend? No one even asked me for a date. God, please just kill me. I'm a complete failure. Mom and Dad are gone. My life's a mess. Please take me to them. Please." Exhaustion finally overtook her, and she fell deep into sleep. "Your Highness, more wine?" "Please," she said, holding out her glass. "No, Your Highness. Allow me, my princess." She pulled her gloved hand back and let the server pour another glass of Chardonnay. She stared across the table at her prince, the tall and dark Pietro. He smiled back at her, then stood and bowed as the king and queen entered the dining hall. She stood as well. The queen took her seat at the table and gave the princess a cold stare, but the king came over and kissed her hand, letting his lips linger. He smiled and then took his seat at the head of the table. He raised his glass. "I propose a toast to the fairest woman in all the land." A broad smile came to the queen's lips. "My sweet Princess Myrtle." The broad smile quickly crossed the room and landed on Myrtle's face. The snubbed queen threw her glass on the floor, shattering it into 1,000 pieces, stood and stormed out of the hall. "Ouch!" She jumped from her chair and saw her stepbrother heading for the kitchen and screamed, "Mom!" She felt a hand on her shoulder. "Hi, honey." "Oh, it's you. Hello, Father." "Father, I can't take my stepbrother anymore. He keeps pinching me and stealing my stuff. I even caught him peeking at me in the bathroom. I don't know what to do anymore. Please help me. I wish I could just die." She was out of breath after that spiel. "I'm sorry, honey. It was me this time. I can't take it anymore. Everyone wants to hurt me." "I am truly sorry, Myrt. I'll speak to your stepbrother again." "Supper's ready," her stepmother called from the kitchen. Her stepfather escorted her into the kitchen. "Honey, I think I may have a way you can put all your troubles behind you." He knew as soon as he said it that he had chosen the wrong set of words to use when talking to his precious sore-bottomed daughter. His face turned red with embarrassment, but he continued, "It will be difficult and possibly dangerous, but it could solve all your problems and maybe some of ours as well. How happy are you with your situation? What percentage of Americans do you think are happy with their lot in life? What percent of the entire world's people do you think are content with their place in the world?" There are many studies on this subject with varied results, but the average is somewhere in the 30% range. Americans rate a little higher than the remainder of the world, but the number is not significant. What's the reason for such a miserably poor percentage of happiness among human beings, particularly in America? The vast majority have a relatively easy existence. True, there are homeless and jobless, but that comprises less than 10%. The inhabitants of Eden had absolutely everything. Well, almost. What didn't they have? They didn't have one little tree, and because of that, they weren't satisfied. They weren't happy. Lucifer had even more than the happy couple from Eden. He had the run of the entire universe. He could fly anywhere and see and do anything he wished, whenever he wished. But he too wanted something more. He believed he could become a god. He believed he could rule the universe better than the God who was already doing so. Sadly, he was very mistaken and chose to take revenge by rebellion. What was most unfortunate was that he apparently was not the only one who was unhappy with having everything. In the end, the figure turned out to be 33% unhappy. The Bible states that 33% of all angels joined the forces of rebellion, Revelation 12:4. The theories as to why so many are so unsatisfied has been discussed and debated since the beginning of time with no real consensus as to an answer. The fact is that when one has a choice, any life form will not always choose wisely or correctly, or however you want to put it. It is one question I desperately want to ask my Creator if and when I get that chance. Suffice it to say that over half of all life forms that can choose are unhappy or unsatisfied or just plain un. What if you were a little girl living today and had been named Myrtle? Myrtle is not a popular name in our modern world. In 2018, Myrtle was the 2,277th most popular name given to American children. So if you were born in 2018 in America and given the name Myrtle, you might not like it and even might consider changing it in the future. However, a little over 100 years ago in 1890, it was the 28th most popular name in America. Its meaning is that of a tree, but it also has the meaning victory. Probably the most popular Myrtle is Myrtle Beach in South Carolina, a very popular and beautiful resort. Like other older names, Myrtle may again become more popular in the future. We shall see. What is her name, Mordecai? The man in the expensive suit asked. Hadassah. Oh, such a lovely name. Does it mean beautiful in your Hebrew? Yes, Mordecai answered. Have you made a decision? I will need to know before I leave, the adjutant of King Xerxes once said. She's not really my daughter, she is my cousin. So she will have to tell you herself, Myrtle? Mordecai motioned. Myrtle, the adjutant quizzed. The name Hadassah and Myrtle mean the same thing in our language, Mordecai said. How appropriate a name. Hadassah, Myrtle, you are a beautiful creation. He stepped forward and put both hands on her waist. He slid them up and down her perfect figure. She internally winced, but managed to keep from shrinking from his touch. She was now old enough to know men were all the same. But her discussions with Mordecai had been long detailed. She had come to realize that she might have a higher purpose. Rather, God might have a higher purpose for her. She hated the fact that she was an orphan. She missed her parents terribly and never forgave her God for taking them away from her. But with Mordecai's help, maybe he and she could make some good come of it. She thought for a long time about it and finally came to a decision. Yes, she said as the adjutant kept running his hands over her. Wonderful, he said. Have her at the women's house by 8 tomorrow morning. The king's chamberlain and the custodian of women, Haggai, will be expecting you. He turned and strutted out of the house, a wry smile creasing his aging face. Congratulations, Myrtle. I'm so happy for you, Mordecai said. I don't know. I'm scared. God will be with you, my dear. As we talk, we don't always get what we want, but I believe God needs you. He squeezed her delicate hand, and she stared at his rough one with anxious but determined eyes. Life put our heroine Myrtle in a situation she did not like. In fact, a situation none of us would like. She lost her parents, ended up in her cousin's house, disliked her step-siblings, disliked her name, and disliked the foreign country she and her people had to live in. It's very likely not a one of us would like to be in such a situation. The tragedy is that many people in this world are in exactly that place. Does God put us in such a place? Many would say yes and might be right, but I believe that man and his continual practice of evil is why we are all where we are. However, our heroine, also in that position, was given an opportunity to use her position for the betterment of her fellow man. Rather than shying away from the situation with all the unpleasantness she knew would go with it, she grasped the opportunity and, as they say in modern parlance, ran with it. I'm not sure I would have done the same, but if you sit down and sort through it, God did have a plan for her, and the beautiful thing about it is that he knew exactly what she would do, and she did it. Who is that one? King Xerxes one asked. I am not sure, Your Highness. I will ask the chamberlain. He went over and asked Haggai. He returned with the answer. Hadassah, he said. The great beauty contest, appropriately called Miss Persia, was in full swing. The king could hardly contain himself as beautiful girl after beautiful girl paraded across the brightly lit stage. The MC was Bertrano Parquet, someone imported from Italy to run the show. As Hadassah, that is Myrtle, was introduced, the king stood and clapped wildly. There were still 20 or so girls left to parade across the stage in the evening gown competition, but the king was beginning to think that this Hadassah, whoever she was, might be the one to replace his disobedient queen Vashti. He stared at each one intently, but the raven-haired beauty he had seen earlier with a sweet face and perfect figure kept flashing in front of his eyes. Well, Your Highness, only a few more to go. Any ideas? Personally, I could never make such a decision. They're all beautiful, all magnificent. The king's adjutant, the one who had visited Hadassah's home, was now the prime minister of all Persia, and he was determined to make the most of it. Haman, Your Highness, I think I've made my decision. Shall I relay your decision to Bertrano? No, have all the beautiful princesses pass in front of me more closely this time, the king said. As you wish, Your Highness. And so the parade of magnificence began again. Each contestant stopped directly in front of the king, bowed and smiled, and handed him a rose. Haman couldn't believe he was so close to so much feminine beauty, but when Xerxes reached out and took hold of Hadassah's hand, a feeling of anger began welling inside him. All this beauty, all this providence, and his instincts were now telling him that this little orphan was going to be the new queen. He gritted his teeth and squeezed his hands together, but he knew things were going bad, very bad. This little Hadassah, or Myrtle, or whoever she was, would be ruling over him, the prime minister of the entire world. He began to shake visibly as the parade of beauty wound to a close, and the king leaned over to him and whispered the name. Bertrano stood on the stage, opened the envelope Haman handed him, and the winner is, Bertrano drew out the is for effect, Hadassah. Bible stories can be very fascinating, and yet when you sift through them, very contemporary in substance. What it says is that humanity really hasn't changed all that much in its 6,000-year written history. The story of Esther is a riveting account of an orphan's rise from complete obscurity to become the most powerful woman, and thus the second most powerful human in all the world. Her moxie, if you will, is most amazing. Her faith is even more amazing. Maybe she was forced to go to the king's court, and maybe she was chosen for additional reasons, but in the next part of the story, her actions are brash and full of self-confidence. I urge you to take a hard look at this story of Esther. It's only 10 chapters in length and won't take up much of your time, but what you can learn is priceless. Whatever spot you're in life, no matter how you got there or who put you there, can be taken advantage of. If you take stock of your life, use a little prayer, use a little bit of friendly advice, focus your energies and are willing to work for it, you can do anything. Matthew 17:20 says it best. If you have just the tiniest bit of faith, you can move Mount Everest from Asia to North America. The popular theme of Christian preaching today has morphed into one of expectancy. Wait for your reward from God. You will soon be much better off than you are, or you will soon be wealthy. There's nothing wrong with claiming your promises from the Almighty, and I encourage it, but God gave you more talent than you'll ever use. And He expects you to use it. History is full of people who use their talents to accomplish amazing things. Many of them started with practically nothing. Abraham Lincoln comes to mind. He had nothing but read widely, worked hard, and became a lawyer. He then went on to win an improbable election. to become President of the United States. He then went on to reunite a nation he alone seemed to know would be essential to preserve any freedom humanity so desperately needed. Without the United States, World War I would have likely been lost. Then if there had been a second World War, it too would have most certainly been lost, and with it any hope of the preservation of human rights. I can only imagine that the Cold War would have ended in total annihilation. I just love your new name. Esther is such a pretty name, her friend Zeresh said. The king gave it to me. It means morning star, but I like my old name better, Esther said, taking another sip of wine. This is a wonderful banquet. My king Xerxes has really outdone himself. What was your old name? I mean the name you had before coming queen, Zeresh corrected her poor choice of words quickly. Myrtle. It means beautiful, Esther said. But as soon as she said it, she knew she shouldn't have. Isn't that a Hebrew name? I think I heard one of my husband Haman's servants use it once. I don't know. I was an orphan. I never knew my real parents. I think it... Good evening, ladies. You look marvelous this fine evening. Haman unknowingly saved his queen. He leaned over and kissed his wife Zeresh on the lips, then kissed the extended hand of his queen Esther. Lingering a little too long, Zeresh pulled him away by his coat. Where's the king, dear? Zeresh asked. Oh, he's over talking to some of the dignitaries. I think the Prime Minister of India and the Greek ambassador. Our king is always making new friendships and new deals. He is amazing. Yes, he is. When is he going to begin the extermination of all the Hebrews? Esther asked. What's today? The 9th, I think. Yes, it will take place on the 13th of February, and you know what? It will happen all in one day. I've set up all things with the army. In 24 little hours, 1,000,000 Hebrews gone, kaput. The kingdom will be so much better without those vermin, and a lot richer too. Haman leaned back on his recliner and beamed with pride. Esther, why don't you go over and congratulate the king on his beautiful plan? She looked over toward Xerxes, but he was in deep conversation with the newly crowned queen of Egypt. She stood and walked quickly to the door and into her chambers. Tears rolled down her face, and she lay down on her bed and cried aloud, realizing she was shaking but couldn't stop either shaking or crying. Her chambermaid came in and began to slowly massage her shoulders. My queen, whatever is the matter? The maid said. You wouldn't understand. I just wasn't cut out to be queen, the sobbing and shivering continued. I understand. It's been a month since the king called for you. Did he speak to you this evening? No. We maids do a lot of talking. This king has been spending more time with some of his other wives, and don't say anything, but the last week he spent 3 nights with Zeresh. Haman's wife? The maid nodded. I'll strangle her as soon as I get the chance. Tonight us maids here, he has invited the Queen of Egypt to his chambers after the banquet. Esther's sobbing was converting to anger, but her shaking did not. It's nothing harder than being a queen. You're not only a servant to your husband, but the whole world watches your every move. My former queen Vashti was not summoned by Xerxes for 6 months. Well, he feasted every night with a different wife. Then after 6 months, he summoned her to the feast to parade her around and show off her beauty, and she was the most beautiful woman in the world. No offense, my queen. None taken. Please go on. Vashti is half Greek, and she was livid. She refused to go to the feast, and now she's locked up forever in that tower. So what do I do, Mirab? What do I do? I'm the queen of the world, and yet the most helpless person in the kingdom of Medo-Persia. Esther's shaking had finally stopped, and her makeup-streaked face revealed anger, fear, and frustration. Esther, you must risk your life. You must go into the king, Mirab said. I don't know. I don't want to die. He'll kill me, Esther said. He won't. He still loves you. He can't risk deposing 2 queens. The realm will not tolerate such an act. I don't know, but I've only got 3 days, Esther said. Why is that? Oh, Haman has cooked up a Esther froze. She knew the chambermaids knew everything, but did Mirab know Esther was a Hebrew? Esther wasn't sure, but she was sure Mirab knew of the extermination order. You may leave now. I'll be fine. You want your nightgown brought? I'll be fine. Please leave me. Mirab bowed and left the chamber. Esther had come from obscurity. She didn't like her life, but determined to make something of it. She had become the queen of the world, the second most powerful person in all the world. It is estimated that the population of the world at the time was some 60 million. The population of Medo-Persia was about 30 million. It is said to have been the largest kingdom in land area that the world has ever known. It lasted some 200 years. Esther ruled the world, yet her hands were now tied so tightly that she was powerless. She had fallen out of her king's favor and was about to see her beloved Hebrew race, some 2 million people spread over the 127 provinces of Medo-Persia, be exterminated. She had only 3 days to act, but her despair overwhelmed her. In fact, as Hebrew as she was, she knew she too was to be exterminated. What would you do? Prayer always comes to mind in a crisis. Also consultation with family and friends. Or you could let things go and see what fate would bring, or maybe you could run. Certainly there would be some place for exile, Greece or China. Someone would want a queen. That is until they found out you were of the wrong race. Maybe just give up and die, or maybe you could act. Take the problem on head on. Let's see what our heroine chose to do. You got to do something. You just can't sit in your hands on this one, Esther, her father and cousin Mordecai said. I know, Esther said. If you just sit here and do nothing, they'll put you to death. You know that. And me and all our relatives. God will figure something out to prevent the extermination of everybody. He always has, but us will be finito, gone, Mordecai said. I know all that, but what? She said in desperation. There's nothing I can do. My hands are tied. I'm a dead woman. No, girl, a weak little girl, just like I used to be. She rang her now shaking hands. Something must be wrong with me. I shake all the time. I must have some disease. Maybe I'll die. I hope it's tomorrow. You know what you have to do, Mordecai said slowly and deliberately. I know, but I can't. I'll die either way, Esther said haltingly. I know. I've got to face up and go into Xerxes' court. Esther, Mordecai said. It's okay. We have a lot of little secrets, the king and I, she said. When will you do it? Mordecai said. I don't know. You've only got 3 days, dear, Mordecai reminded. I know. Please just shut up and let me think. The silence lasted quite a while. Okay. I'll work on my courage. I'll go in Tuesday. What's that, the 12th? Mordecai nodded. I'll fast 3 days. I'll pray to you, and I'll pray, and you pray. You pray harder than you've ever prayed in your whole life. Then Tuesday morning I'll do it. I'll go in there to his court and see what he does. See if he will hold out that scepter or not. He better. I'll kill him right on the spot. I'll hide this dagger under my skirt. Esther, you can't kill the king. You can't do. If I perish, I perish. No, go start praying. Esther 4:16. 3 days passed quickly. On Tuesday, February 12th, one day before the extermination was to happen, Esther, dressed in her best gown with her maidens in tow and her trusty dagger in her stocking, and marched royally into the court of Xerxes I, ruler of all the world. She was truly a magnificent woman, tall, with long dark hair, a perfect nose, sensuous mouth, and the most beautiful, nearly black eyes. The noisy court immediately went silent, and the king looked up to see the woman he loved so dearly staring at him with an attitude he had not seen before. He stood, bowed, and said, "To what do I owe the honor of your presence, your highness?" "I have come to ask a favor of my king. She bowed deeply. As she did so, her left hand gripped her dagger, but as she did so, she felt something cold and hard on her right shoulder. Her hand relaxed, and she slowly rose, and her hypnotic eyes again met his. "It's so wonderful to see you again, my dear. You truly are the loveliest woman in all my kingdom. What is your request of me?" Anger welled within Esther as she saw Haman's wife, Zeresh, sitting on her throne, Esther's throne. But she somehow maintained her smile through the gritted teeth. "I wish to invite you to a banquet in your honor this evening." "Where will this banquet be, my love? Shall I bring friends?" Xerxes said. "It will be in the palace restaurant on Darius Avenue, and yes, you can bring one friend." "Oh, my favorite restaurant. May I bring our dear Zeresh? She is a gourmet cook, you know. We have been sharing recipes." "I'm sure," Esther said, then realizing she had gotten away with an insult, said, "No, they have cooks there, but bring her husband if you like." "I will do so. Thank you, dearest queen," Xerxes said. "I would ask you to stay, but I have urgent business to attend to before the banquet. Have a good day, my lovely." She turned, gave the knife a little squeeze, and marched confidently from the room. She now knew that she, the Queen of Medo-Persia, was the real ruler of the world. The rest of the story is outlined in the book of Esther, chapters 7 and 8. Haman was hanged. Mordecai became the new prime minister. Esther was back in full favor with her king, and the Jews were ordered to defend themselves the next day, which they successfully did. Interestingly, the order was sent out on the 12th, and the defense was the next day, the 13th. The distance to Shushan, located in modern-day western Iran, to India is over 2,000 miles, and from Shushan to Ethiopia over 3,000 miles. I have no idea how this order was communicated for such a vast distance in 24 hours. Maybe they had some sort of telegraph. After all, they apparently had some type of battery. Esther 8:14 states, "So the posts that rode upon mules and camels went out, hastened and pressed on by the king's commandment. In any event, God's people, Israel, the people that chose God, were spared another extermination." The Bible tells of several previous attempts to exterminate them from the earth. The flood of Noah in 2348 BC, the Egyptians at the Red Sea in 1450 BC, the Assyrians in 722 BC, the Babylonians in 586 BC. Doubtless there were others, but this attempt in 483 BC also failed. Esther's story is not unlike that of countless billions of other humans. She starts out her life with little except her own talents. She doesn't like her lot in life. She is seemingly hopeless, but then is given a chance not only to succeed, but to succeed beyond her wildest dreams. She is fearful, but seizes the opportunity given to her and makes the very most of it. True, the last portion of her life may not have been perfect. She is given Haman's house to live in. Likely the king has moved on to women of more noble birth. But what she accomplished is beyond question. She not only survived, but she was the instrument that allowed an entire race of people to survive. She called upon her God, and he heard her. She prayed to her God, and he heard her. She seized the opportunity and ran with it until she was ruler of the world. As we referenced earlier, it is the opportunity of all of us to claim the promises of God, and there are thousands of them recorded in the Bible. But God also gave you talents to not only better yourself, but to better all humanity. Matthew 25:14 through 30. Take a hard look at this woman, then take a hard look at yourself. The opportunities abound in this world. You may have put forth some effort to find them, but they are there. Once you find them, act on them. The human has two purposes on this earth. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and your neighbor as yourself. Matthew 22:37 to 39. Oh, you may believe in some other god, Buddha or Allah or Zeus or Ra, or no god at all. You may deem it not necessary to advance your own lot in life. But when you look around you, review the annals of our tragic history, and view the suffering and desperation that pervades our planet, despite the vast progress of intelligence, you can't just stand idly by and do nothing. I admonish you, no, God admonishes you to step through the opportunities available and make your world a better and safer place. The Bible verse with the very luckiest of numbers says it all. Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. Matthew 7:7.